All right. So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Chelsea Conaway, and I am the Executive Director of the Human Services Alliance of Greater Prince William here in Prince William County, Virginia. And so, if you're not familiar with the Alliance, we are a nonprofit association of human services providers of all stripes, all colors, all different types of service offerings. And we work within the service area of the city of Manassas, Manassas Park, and Prince William County. And so we are so excited today that we can bring you all some communications training. And so we have two amazing trainers. You guys are going to learn so much. You're going to really enjoy this. We cannot wait to get things started. So I won't belabor the point too much, but first we're going to go ahead with Ibrahim Zafar, and he works with Lens and Media. They're a wonderful company that we have the honor of doing some really exciting work with. And also Jason Schreiner. Jason Schreiner works with the Occoquan district of Prince William County government. And so he does a lot of their community engagement and all of the really great things that you see coming out of the county in terms of constituent services and helping to connect people to resources and to one another. And so they're going to be teaching us about how to make really great content and then how to push that content out into the community. So whether you are based in this area, maybe you are working outside of the greater Prince William area, you're doing some other wonderful work, this is still going to be pertinent to you. You're still going to learn a ton. Something else that you should keep in mind is that even if you don't work specifically in human services, in terms of social work or in terms of social justice, anything that you're doing to serve a human, you can actually benefit from this training. So thank you all so much for joining. And at this point, I'm going to pass the mic over to Ibrahim. So Ibrahim, I'm making you a co-host so that you can do your screen sharing and all that good stuff. Now I'm going to mute myself. You should be able to unmute yourself, Ibrahim. If you can't, please let me know.
All right, thank you so much, Chelsea. I'm just going to be sharing my screen here. I believe this is the right one. And we'll share the sound. Nope. Asking for my password. All right, so you should be able to see my screen. Chelsea, can you guys see there's a slide that says creating content that makes a difference? All right. So, okay, whoops, let's get there. All right, well, thank you everybody for having me. Chelsea, thank you so much for having me, to both you and Reggie. I really appreciate it. And I'm actually really excited to be able to talk a little bit today about how to create content that makes a difference. We're in 2021, we're just kind of coming off of a pandemic, and the whole landscape of content has changed significantly. I can't stress enough how the times that we live in today, when it comes to content creation, are significantly different than 2020, than 2019, than 2018. Just within the past 5 years, content as we know it has just completely changed. And a lot of people haven't sort of caught on, and I don't blame them because technology is changing faster than our perceptions of technology. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about our company, what we do, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do within your organization to create impact-based content. And that's just really a fancy way of saying, how do you create content that makes a difference? And so moving along, you should always talk about the why before the what. And the why is actually rooted within myself. And this kind of photo is really funny to me because it kind of shows my journey as a content creator, as a filmmaker. In 2014, I was just coming out of an engineering degree at North Carolina State University. I don't know if there's any North Carolina folks in the audience, but that's where I'm from. And this was my definition of success. I mean, this was me, wearing a suit to work, sitting in Roslyn. I was working for a consulting company at the time. And that was my definition of who I was. And my own transformation happened in the next 5 years when I started to pick up a camera. And I started to learn about what it is to create content. And then in 5 years, in 2019, I found myself in the deserts of different countries of in Pakistan and Africa, filming for nonprofits. And so going from a very corporate background to creating content, it was sort of a natural journey that happened over the course of 5 years, which ultimately led to me starting Lens and Media in 2019. So what is LEM? LEM is, well, it's short for Lens and Media, and started it in 2019. And the goal was, well, it came from essentially a problem. The problem was this: there are a lot of people and individuals and organizations that unfortunately are not given the tools to create content. They're not able to create impact-based content. And that sort of training that I learned over actually a greater part of 7 to 8 years, because I'd started prior to working in consulting, unfortunately, those tools are not readily available. And a lot of times organizations are so swamped. I mean, you have so many things you have to do on a day-to-day basis. You have to lead an organization, you have to be a communications expert, and you have to know about content and the psychology that goes behind content. And so Lens and Media was my sort of shot in the dark to say, okay, well, let's create an organization that is able to create content for organizations that can help them inspire their audiences. And that's where Lens and Media sort of came from. And in short, we are a video production and creative agency that provides a done-for-you service from screenwriting to social growth. So I want to start with screenwriting because many of you are familiar with movies. We all watch Netflix, Amazon. I mean, we have our favorite shows. Those shows started off on a piece of paper. They started off with dialogue and everything happening on a piece of paper. And that piece of paper was kind of concepted from an idea. So we work with organizations and we kind of come up with that initial idea of what either that one piece of content is going to be or what that ad campaign is going to be. We work with them and incrementally help from that screenwriting process. Then we go into our actual producing process and we get on set with them. We have our director of photography, we have myself, we have our assistant camera, we have our lighting experts, we have everyone on set to create that video or that campaign. And then not only do we stop when we deliver that video for you, we actually help you grow to grow that video on social media. So talking to you about analytics, talking to you about how to specifically create content for your audience. We examine your audience and we understand who your audience is online, so that we can better create content for them. We never create content without understanding who that content is going to be branded for. So that's who we are. And we have worked with, at this point, we've been really blessed to work with many organizations, particularly nonprofits. We always find that nonprofits are the ones that we work most closely with, is because nonprofits have a mission. That mission is to inspire donors or is to inspire audience members to actually, their conversion is considered a donation. So a nonprofit wants to create success and they want to do that through donations. And so a large part of our service offerings have been geared towards getting nonprofits donations through large consumer bases. And you know, one of the pieces of content that we invest heavily in is the series called Behind the Lens. And I figured I wanted to kind of show the first minute of this series because it's actually really pertinent to our nonprofit friends in this summit. And so what it is was a series that we created to essentially provide value to our nonprofit partners and say, hey, we're going to just create a series and just try to see ways that we can help you create better content. We don't have to be in contract. We don't have to be anything. We just want to give that information out there to kind of cement ourselves as an expert within the field and also be able to provide value.
Hey guys, EJ Horseman here, and today we're going to be going over 3 ways that you can use video marketing to inspire your donors. This is episode 1 of Behind the Lens by LEM. Roll the intro. If you work at a nonprofit or have worked at a nonprofit, you know that the number one goal you have as an organization, besides providing services to your beneficiaries, is to inspire your donors. One of the most important ways you're going to inspire your donors is by inspiring them visually, literally showing them where their money is going. Today, we're going to be going over 3 ways that you can use video marketing to inspire both current donors and new donors to join your nonprofit's mission. For those of you that don't know us, LEM is a video production and creative agency that helps organizations like yours inspire their customers to act. We've created beautiful, stunning, moving images for our nonprofit clients, as well as clients from other industries. And we've taken our experiences in film and poured it into this channel. Over the last few years, we have helped nonprofits raise close to $2 million in donations to our video campaigns. And today, I'm excited to show you exactly how we did that. Before we get started, if you want to...
So that's just a quick sort of overview in terms of our nonprofit arena. And so I felt that was a little bit important, particularly for the summit. But we've been really fortunate. We've seen a great interest and uptake from our nonprofit base. And so that's kind of where I started. I actually also have a nonprofit background. Originally, I was, prior to joining LEM full-time, I was the head of partnerships for a nonprofit in the area, an international nonprofit. And so a lot of what we did in-house, we really wanted to focus on how to leverage partnerships and communication to be able to inspire people to donate large amounts of money. And so understanding that background was helpful for me to actually, when I started LEM, to be able to know what the nonprofit clients actually want from communications. So I want to get into a little bit about advertising. Like, what is advertising? Before we get into content, I want to get into like the definition of advertising. And advertising has changed significantly. Today, on this particular day, there are so many technologies available to us. I can just list a few of MailChimp, Rocket Reach, LinkedIn, Facebook Business Manager. I mean, there's so many technologies available to all of us that were not available in the past 15 years or the past 16 years. And like I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, we now have to be like subject matter experts on these technologies, which is a huge undertaking for all of us. But we're going to get into that in just a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about 2005. And the reason I say 2005 is because, A, that was about 16 years ago. It's kind of, like I mentioned, things were very different. And for myself, at the time, I was working, my dad owns an IT business. And so at the time, I was working for him sort of part-time. And one of his biggest ways that he would send out communications, and a lot of organizations at the time, was through actual physical mailers. And I remember us going through and licking the stamps and putting on sort of direct call to actions in an envelope that said, subscribe to these IT services, here's what you want. And that was one of the most beneficial ways that organizations knew how to actually get people to be interested within their services. And it's funny because now that's completely changed. And besides from just envelopes and sort of those mailers, one thing that has changed is also we now not only use things like Super Bowl commercials and online commercial, or at the time it was just TV commercials, but we have online commercials. So where back then you had to watch a Super Bowl commercial or watch something on your TV to be advertised to, now it's very different. And if you just examine those advertisements from back in the day, they weren't, it wasn't just free content. It wasn't like, some of these amazing organizations giving you free tips on how to do certain things without asking for money. They were asking for your money with the first advertisement. They were saying, hey, here's this great car and here's how much it costs and here's how you can go buy it. So, and today we would call that a conversion campaign, but there wasn't a sort of heavy brand emphasis on a brand awareness campaign. There wasn't a sort of lead generation campaign. Everyone within their first advertisement was really just trying to get you to convert into a purchaser or a consumer of their product. And now the landscape has changed significantly. A lot has changed significantly within the past 16 years. particularly when it comes to content. Some of the best organizations now are investing millions of dollars into creating content just for you to watch, just so that you can know their name in the back of their head. So let's take, for an example, Gordon Ramsay, right? Let's talk a little bit about the whole Gordon Ramsay brand. A lot of us like cooking, and especially with COVID, I mean, cooking just kind of exploded. Like everyone's in their homes cooking and whatnot. The Gordon Ramsay team has invested millions in Gordon Ramsay or in his marketing just so that he can provide you with free content. And so now he has a YouTube channel where it's literally just him giving you the recipes that he's invested, so many years into creating, and that now he's giving it to you as a consumer for free. He's not even asking for anything in return. The only thing that he's getting in return is you remembering the name. And then one day when you're in Florida or when you're in some country or city that his restaurant is there, that you just might go to his restaurant. But just take a look at the quality here. Take a look at the level of investment.
The secret to making great food is to ensure you lock in every last.
I mean, just within this particular image right here, look at the lighting setup, right? They've set up all these external lights. You can see the shadows in the background. It's not just a simple setup in his kitchen. I mean, they've organized the fruits. They've done hair and makeup on him. They've organized everything that's probably, was set by a set designer. Just this particular episode probably cost about $50,000 to $60,000 for a 20-minute episode. And so these companies are investing a lot of money just for your single view. And I think that sort of relationship between a content consumer and content creator is to me sort of resembles what content has become in 2021. This is what you're competing up against. You're competing up against this level of quality for free. Now it's not good enough to say, hey, I create free content for you. Now you have to say, I have to create really compelling free content for my audience, for them to engage with. This is the sort of competition that your consumers are seeing on their Facebook feeds. So if your consumer if you've spent some money into creating an ad, Facebook, it will detect and say, okay, well, they've only spent 5 to 6 seconds on it. Let's queue up Gordon Ramsay's video right afterwards. And then that's the next in line for competition. So it's really important that not only we focus on content creation, but we understand who we're competing against, and we understand the level of quality that they're investing in just to get a single view from a consumer. And we're going to talk a little bit about why they're doing that. So like I mentioned before, we live in content heaven. I mean, 2021 is just, for a content consumer's perspective, it's incredible. Like, you get free content all the time. You get some really low marginal subscription rates for access to Hollywood level productions, where before you'd have to pay $15, $20 to go to the theater. Now you pay like $10 a month. You can watch everything that was in the theater at your fingertips. And for content consumers, it's a great world to live in. For content creators, it's a nightmare, because we have to invest so much time and emphasis into creating content for consumers to actually be invested in to some level of degree. But now with YouTube and Netflix and Google and all these, and it seems like every day there's an announcement of some sort of major company creating a streaming service. There's a big joke within the content space that one day Microsoft is going to create a streaming service, and that it doesn't matter what you do, it doesn't matter what organization you are, you're going to create a streaming service, and that's just the reality for what we live in. And in order for us to understand what content is, so getting back to originally what we're talking a little bit about advertising, we want to talk about what content really is. And content is just value. I mean, you could say content is a video, it could be a photo, it could be a GIF, it could be an Instagram reel, Instagram story. But ultimately, content is just value. And the mindset I want everyone here to go into when they're creating content, I want everyone to get into one singular mindset. The mindset is derived from one principle. It's all about being a good person. If you go in with the intentionality of creating content with just being a good person and giving value to your audience, I can promise you that you will see incremental or amazing growth within your sort of reception for the content. So if you decide that, okay, I want to create a marketing campaign and I want to have videos in it, and you decide that, well, I'm going to create a campaign that's just going to talk about my organization. You know, last year we did this year we did this, our board of directors is this, we're this accomplished. That inherently, you're just wanting to sort of tout your own accomplishments. And that's not how we want to approach content. You have to think about it from the position of the individual that's actually viewing your content. And that is the position. Now, if you understand what they want to see, then you will understand the kind of content you want to create. So you work backwards. So put yourself in the position of someone who's actually viewing your content. So your audience member. So if you were to do that for my nonprofit friends here, your audience does not really care much about how long you've been around. They really don't want to know about who's represented on your board of directors, or to some level of extent, they just want to know what's beneficial to them. And one of the things that falls in that category is, you know, let's say if they were to get some sort of, let's say if there was someone on camera speaking about how awesome it was working with that nonprofit and the level of experience and the experience that they had. Well, you know, I got my tax receipts on time. Their communication was great. They did their quarterly thing, you know, their whole quarterly reports or annual reports were done on time. Those are sort of services that you as a consumer of the nonprofit want to hear, because you're like, well, I want my tax receipts. I want my quarterly reports. I want to know where my money is going. And so that's sort of consumer donor centric, whereas compared to everything else is sort of organization centric. So every time you create a piece of content, I want you to really frame it in those sort of ways. How is the consumer going to view the content? And ultimately, is it beneficial to the consumer? And if you are about to create a piece of content and you realize that, oh man, this thing is really not going to jive with the consumer, and you know, this thing is really not going to sit well with them, then you can go back and sort of backpedal, understand, well, why isn't it beneficial for them? And are we really just going at this with sort of making ourselves look better on camera? And if you are, then you might want to kind of change your approach when creating content. And what we call that at LEM is the difference between you content versus me content. So are you creating content for you, as in the donor, or are you creating content for me, the person who works at the nonprofit? And so understanding the difference between you content versus me content is going to incrementally and just impact your growth to a degree that you'll never understand before. Because then you start to get empathy. And empathy is the biggest thing when it comes to content. One is creating value, but number two is creating empathy. Empathy means that you're able to step into your consumer's position, understand their pain point, and understand even their schedule. So, okay, you have a donor who could potentially be watching your video. Well, let's understand this donor's day-to-day. They're spending their 9 to 5 at a job, and they're probably tired because their job is really exhausting. And you know, your donors work within a certain industry. And by the time they get home, do they really want to sit down and watch a 5-minute informational video about your nonprofit? I mean, that level of empathy goes a long way, because if you understood who your donor is, then you'll understand that ultimately they want to come back. And maybe within that sort of hour or two that they have between dinner and they going to bed, when they want to sort of dedicate their time towards something really beneficial towards them, maybe they want to learn a skill. Maybe they want to learn something new. Maybe they want to see something that they haven't seen before. So maybe you could create a piece of content that could actually give them some value, give them some meaning. So let's say you're a nonprofit that helps with sort of craftsman sort of things in terms of low income communities. You help them sort of do things with their hands. Then maybe you could create a piece of content that sort of helps everyone. Says, today we're going to do a sort of 1 minute woodworking shop on how you can create this sort of bird feeder and do it within $30, and it will take a minute to do it. And that way you're supplying a bit of value, and you're also empathizing with your viewer. And so understanding that relationship is really important when creating impact-based content. So I have this picture of Homer Simpson, and this is a sort of what I imagine when there's an organization that just wants to talk about themselves, right? They're just like, we're the best, we do this, and this is why you should love us. And so I thought it would be a bit of a, kind of a joke here to put this here, because this is every time, if you imagine yourself doing that for your organization, just think of this picture of Homer Simpson and sort of shy away from that. Think more about how you can not be Homer Simpson when it comes to creating content. So we've talked a little bit about creating content. We've talked a little about what advertising is, and we've talked a little bit about just how things have changed dramatically. And if at this point in the presentation you're sort of beating yourself up and saying, oh yeah, I've done it wrong, it's okay. I don't blame anybody in 2021 who's not an expert on consumer psychology, because ultimately it's not your fault. Technology is changing so rapidly, and ultimately you're having to catch up. And so that, if you're at that stage right now, it's okay. And myself, I'm telling you this as an expert on this field for about 8 years. Don't worry about it. We can all start fresh, and you can start today creating content that makes a difference. So we're going to talk a little bit about social media now. And, in 2004, Facebook started, and I remember, I think I got on Facebook around 2009. And that was the only social media that was around. And now there's Facebook, and that's still sort of the biggest one. There's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's LinkedIn, there's Twitter, and each of them have a different language that you now have to spend time learning about and sort of cultivating your content for that language. At LEM, we have Julia. She's our digital media producer. She actually posts all the content on our channels. And so for our clients as well, the clients that we work with in terms of managing their social media, when she posts stuff, just like one piece of content, it can take up to 4 hours just for her to post one thing. 4 hours for one post across like 4 or 5 different social media channels. And that's because of one thing. You have to create the language and the content for each sort of social media platform. So, for Instagram, they have this weird thing in the back end that compresses your videos if it's above a certain file size. So if your video is above 35 megabytes, then it'll compress it. And then when you post it, it'll look really grainy. A lot of you might have seen this before, where it like compresses a video. So we literally have to export something for Instagram, particularly for Instagram. We have to compress it in our video processor before we actually export it into Instagram. We have to create a caption for Instagram. We have to use our analytics for Instagram. And then we get into Twitter. Well, Twitter, you can't do 50 words. You can only do a few characters. And so we have to redesign the caption. How do we fit a paragraph into a caption just for Twitter? LinkedIn is different. It's more for business professionals. So how do we translate that language into LinkedIn now for business professionals? And then Facebook, how do we make it more community oriented? So ultimately, it's a huge undertaking, and it takes a long time for us, but understand that it's not easy for anybody. And it's going to take time for sort of anyone when it comes to posting. And I want to start off with the one sort of principle here is do not do it for the likes. Don't do it for the retweets. Don't do it for the shares. Do it for the honesty of your organization. Be authentic to yourself and create content and do social media posts that are true to who you are. Your organization should have a voice. as just same way as if you were to imagine Target. When you look at the brand Target, you imagine someone in your head. There's someone that you think of when you think of the organization Target. And you even imagine sort of the dialect that they have, or imagine the way that they're speaking to you. You're sort of imagining an ideal target customer representative. And so the same way that you have that representation of one of the major brands, your consumers will have that representation of you when they interact with you on social media. So it should be an authentic voice. It should be a uniform voice. And if you're an organization that has 12 people or 15 people managing your social media, highly recommend that you condense it down to just one, maybe two. And those two people having a unique and uniform brand voice when it comes to that social media presence. And the second thing is incremental growth. Many times we have clients say, well, we've spent some time and effort and we've created this post and we only got a few likes. Social media is the long game. At LEM, we started with 0 followers, 0 likes. We actually started the channels in 2020 last year, almost 11 months ago. And we started with 0 everything. And now I think we're probably like a few hundred followers for each account. But we literally had KPIs. We would say in the first 6 months, in the first 3 months, we want to achieve 15 followers. In the second 3 months, we want to achieve 15 more followers. Okay, what's our Q3 goal? Well, we'll do 30 followers. So understand that it's going to take time and it'll take a lot of energy, but it will happen over time, over consistency. So if your organization has a communications department, or if you are your organization's communications department, go back to your organization, go back to your Excel. I heard a laugh over there. It's true. A lot of organizations, there's one person who's the CEO, the communications department, they are everything. But treat it like a separate department, have time for your communications department. Go in there, create an Excel spreadsheet and say, this month we got 10 likes. Great. Next month, we're going to try to get 11 likes, right? Or we're going to stay at 10. Maybe likes isn't your metric. Maybe, once again, you're not doing it for the likes. But if you want to see growth, don't set examples of organizations that have thousands of followers and create those as this sort of, oh, I need to be like them. No, they started off somewhere too. And ultimately, if you go at it with sort of a double every sort of year mentality, let's say the first year you have 100 followers. Well, you double that the next year, it's 200, then 400, then 800, then 1600, then 3200. So, start small and think of it like a snowball, and that eventually will happen over time. But initially, when you're starting out and you have no followers, no likes, nothing, focus on honest content, because that is a hack for you to get in front of more audience members. So oftentimes you'll get on Facebook and you'll be going through Facebook and you'll see a video of someone who just like saved a cat, right? They're just like the dodo. They're like, oh man, I just saved a cat. And here's, this is the cat before, and 6 months later, this was the cat later. And a year later, look what happened to this cat. And it's this beautiful story about this cat. Well, ultimately, like that was a very honest piece of content. I mean, it was very authentic. There wasn't any sort of branding or advertising in there. And that sort of content got viral, and it came from an account that had like very few following before. So understand that if you don't have the resources to grow, if you are frustrated about growth and you want to sort of, fast line that growth, then creating honest and authentic content is the best way to do it, to achieve that growth. So once again, create truth in content. Honest content attracts people. People are very smart. There's a sort of blockchain within content that eliminates any sort of false content out there. So within the first 1 second of a piece of content, that's how advanced we've become as humans who've been exposed to social media over 17 years. Over 1 second, we can decide if we want to swipe or if we want to keep watching that video. And so make sure that when you're creating content, that from the first second, it sounds authentic. The tonality sounds authentic, that it's engaging, that you're thinking about, well, will the first 3 seconds attract someone? And even in the sort of way that you're speaking, if it's a sort of direct to camera call to action, be yourself. You know, you don't have to put on a sort of camera personality. I mean, maybe you can get some sort of training tips on how to speak on a teleprompter or just be more authentic and engaging. Ultimately, be yourself. People, that's the only IP that you have in this digital world is yourself. There's no one else like you. So just go heavy and invest in yourself. Be yourself on social media. If you're an organization that really can't invest heavily in sort of film equipment and the digital agency, just be yourself on social media. And ultimately, you will attract a cohort of followers that want to see you as being yourself. And then that will represent even more people. And then they will sort of, through word of mouth, talk to more people. And eventually you'll have a sort of niche following of people that are just subscribed to your organization because they just like the fact that you're honest and authentic. So let's say you've had a bad quarter, right? You've had low donations. You want to, if you're going to go on to social media and be like, hey guys, we've had a great quarter, keep the donations coming. Maybe that's a good time to say, hey, it's been really tough for us. Like, we feel like we're not getting the support from our community. And is there anything that we're doing wrong right now? Is there anything that we could be doing better? Because quarter one for us was just really bad. And so that level of trust and honesty with your audience goes such a long way, because you're ultimately building a vulnerability within that content. You're saying, listen, I'll be honest with you if you can be honest with me. And sort of you giving that token of honesty, that audience member might reply with a comment or like or follow or any of that sort. So understand the tonality and the mood that your organization is, and reflect that mood within your content. You may have had a great 2020. A lot of organizations actually had really successful 2020s when it comes to content or when it comes to their donations. You may say, hey guys, 2020 was incredible for us. Like, we appreciate you so much. We're so thankful for our donors. What can we do that's better? And that might be reflecting if you actually did have a good 2020. Ultimately, reflect the tonality of your organization within your content, and you will see good results. So what about costs, right? This is something that always comes up. Organizations say, well, listen, we don't have thousands of dollars to invest into a video or a video production. And this is where you really have to learn how to bootstrap, and you have to get creative. The benefit of that right now is we live in 2021. And while it is tough for content creators, it's really also easy in some aspects for creating content. We have tools at our disposal that don't require a 4-year degree in video editing, right? You have Instagram Reels, which it literally walks you through how to create a small 10-second story on your phone. We have so many tools at our disposal today that we did not have 2 years ago, that we didn't have 4 years ago. And I guess that's why there's so much content out there, because you don't need a whole crew and lighting and setup. A lot of organizations don't need that. Now, granted, some organizations do, because their audience is used to the high level of quality. And so for us, we sort of work with the whole sort of gambit of all the organizations that kind of have the high quality versus organizations that want to learn how to sort of bootstrap. Now, if you have an iPhone, that's pretty much it. If you have an iPhone, there should not be much of an excuse as to why you're not creating content. Maybe that's what you need to start off with to get to a point where you can sort of hire an agency that will create that next level of content. But if you don't have that, that's totally fine. Just understand what you do have, and don't make a perfect the enemy of good. I love that quote, and I think it's incredible for content, because ultimately it helps you understand, like, just release yourself from high expectations. Stop making yourself feel like you have to have the perfect Instagram page from day one. I've seen organizations that invested heavily in just bootstrapping. They've gone from like 0 following to like thousands of following. And then from there, they start to invest more into how does this post fit in with the branding, all that stuff. just put the content out. And if the benefit you have if you're an organization that has very few followers or anything like that is you can beta test. You can put out a piece of content and see how many likes it got, and then you can put out another completely different sort of piece of content and see how many likes it got or how many followers it got, whatever sort of engagement. And then you can sort of understand, okay, well, which one worked, which one didn't, which one was more authentic, which one wasn't. So ultimately, don't make perfect the enemy of good. Just whatever you do, just keep sort of tweaking, changing, and going from there with that mentality of not having high expectations. And if you can sort of go with that mentality, I promise you, you will be able to create high impact videos. You'll be able to create high impact content, and you will be able to see success, especially in this new digital age of 2021. So that's pretty much it from my end. I can see here that there's some things in the chat, I believe. I'm getting some notifications. So Chelsea, if you want to maybe sort of help me understand if there's questions in the audience or how we can facilitate that, I'd love to answer anything I can.
I don't think there are too many questions in here, just a lot of co-signing. One of the things that we were saying back and forth is just that, something like a ring light just to get lighting from Amazon is only about $30 or so. I know the same is true of something like a tripod. A lot of times we think things are very expensive when they're not. So thank you to Miss Reba for pointing that out to us. Ms. Reba also stated that it's going to be important for us to rethink our marketing strategies, to which I commented, heck yeah, because a lot of the things that, worked for us back in 2019 and before the pandemic, even now, are different. We have to do things differently. So I think it's awesome, like we were saying about always having to adapt. Also, love the quote that we really want to think about not making perfection the enemy of completion and really focusing on that. So that's great. A monitor clamping ring light. Ooh, $15 right now. Thank you, Miss Pauling, for the for the Amazon deal, our lightning deal for today. So I think that is really, really great. And one thing I did have a question about, Ibrahim, is maybe finding the time to do it. I know we said that in terms of having an idea of what we want to share, or even having the tools to do it, since a lot of us do have smartphones that have cameras on them and have different things we could use to create content. We've got those things in terms of equipment, in terms of an idea. I know one issue that we've had has been trying to designate time and devote time and carve out time in our schedules to create content with intention. And I know you mentioned that with something like what Julia was posting for you all, it could have taken up to 4 hours. So when we're looking at maybe what kind of content we'd like to produce, do you have any tips for how we can block that time aside?
Yeah, when I started LEM in 2019, and when I was full-time, which I still am now, it was just a one-man shop. Like, we were literally just myself. So I would have to post the content, I would have to do business relations, and I would have to be on set and all this stuff. One thing that I found really helpful is I allocated like 2 hours of my day before I woke up. Before I would actually woke up. So if I knew my work day started at like 9 a.m., I would wake up at 6:30, and I would, from 7 to 9, I would be like, what is my goal today is to create a piece of content and to post a piece of content for LEM. And it's just about your time allocation. And like, the biggest, I think, fallacy that there is within the industry or within communications is that content is really easy to create. Like, you'll see an Instagram reel or you see like a TikTok, and you'll be like, God, that just took the person five minutes to create. Like, how do they do that? That's a lie. I will promise you this: content takes a long time to create, and if it looks effortless, then it's good content. Like, the analogy I use is Djokovic. I love Djokovic. He's a great tennis player, right? When you see him play tennis, you're just like, anyone can do that. He's such an incredible player. But when you realize that he makes it look so easy that you want to sort of start playing tennis, or for me at least. So understand that like everyone it takes a long time for everyone, that there's departments for organizations that do this. You can just block out like 2 hours of your day, and maybe just once a week. So for us, we used to have just once a week posts that would come out. And that way it would just be easy for me at that point to be like, okay, I can just do 2 hours on a Monday morning to edit this piece of content. And then like the next day I would post it. And now Julia, thank God, she's been like a lifesaver for like just doing all of her content. But if you are an organization that doesn't have that resource, then understand that A, I've been in your position before and it's tough, but B, it's also about just time management. And ultimately you have to sort of water your own communications department too, right? You have to give it that attention as well. So I hope that helps.
That does. I love the idea of making it an appointment, a standing appointment each week to really invest time and energy into our content creation. So thank you so much. Another question that we had from Hatim is, how does one achieve content authenticity when the market feels so saturated with so much already available out there? That's a great question.
That's a great question. There's a lot of content out there. Like there is so much stuff out there. And what you have to realize is that you are not creating content for 100% of the population. You're not creating content for everyone. You're just creating content for those few people that you actually want to inspire through your organization. So being selective about actually who you create content for, and even being selective about who your followers end up being is important. Sometimes people have the shotgun approach where they say, we're going to create a content that's going to be applicable to the men, the women, the baby boomers, the Gen Zs, the millennials. And it's like, no. Just focus on the people that you actually care about. And then you'll create good content. So this could even be just creating content for like one demographic and saying like, okay, well, if your organization is organization that helps the elderly, well, not every organization is creating content for the elderly. So then you've already eliminated like a huge percent of the population. And then from there, you just focus on creating honest content that elderly population wants to see. So if they're like creating content that's like, well, our retirement homes are just so great and spick and span, maybe you want to answer the questions that they're not answering. Maybe you want to examine your competitors and be like, well, they're not talking about sort of these aspects of retirement homes or whatever have you. And maybe we can start creating content in a niche. So the beautiful thing about content, there's always a way and a form for a competitor, for a new organization to come in and break the mold. That's why you see all these sort of trends on social media. Those trends started off with someone who's sitting in their basement with a camera, right? All these new trends happening where it's like these challenges and all that sort of, they become viral because they appeal to someone, but they start off with one single person. So don't be disheartened if you're not creating content that doesn't go viral from day one.
That is so true. So I just saw something online yesterday where people are pretending to ski, and it's called the ski challenge. And there's some song playing and you just pretend you're skiing. So the most random things can go viral. I don't know that you can even predict what that might be when you're sitting in your basement trying to come up with an idea. But I love what you say about the fact that, we can tell a story that no one else is telling. And we can, even if it is a story that people are telling, we can always approach it from a different perspective. And I think that's a great way, especially when we think about nonprofit and human services work, where it can seem like there's a lot of duplication and replication of our services to differentiate ourselves from other groups that might be doing something similar. So
Definitely.
So much. Now, did anyone else have a question? I don't see any more in the chat, but I did want to remind you, of course, you can always be submitting things to the chat, but two, you can unmute yourselves at any point to ask your questions. So if you didn't have time to write it, maybe you're driving, maybe you're doing something else. If you would like to unmute yourself to ask your question, then we'll give you a moment to do so. And if not, then if no one else has a question, let me take a minute. Or can I hear any questions? So then what we can do is go ahead and transition. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. So we're going to transition to, I see a question. Sorry, just kidding, Ibrahim. Don't go anywhere just yet. But one of the things, we have a question from Stephen, and Stephen is saying, I'm looking for a creative way to spread information about scams and frauds to older adults, age 55 and up. Many do not have social media. Any tips? Oh, what a great question. That is such a great question. I'm going to applaud for you while Ibrahim answers your question.
Sure. Yeah, that was a great question. Thank you so much, Stephen, for asking that. You know, when we used to work I used to work at a nonprofit, one of the things that we realized was our older demographic, they obviously weren't on social media. Social media was like our, you know, I think our prime was like 35 to 45, primarily women that would like watch our content. And so we had all this opportunity to reach out to older individuals. And what we realized was just flyers. Like they really responded to these pledge cards on flyers. So unfortunately, you're right. When it comes to content for individuals who are a bit of on the older side, that content is just not going to be on social media. It's going to be like, how do you design a really compelling flyer for that individual? And they love mail. Physical mail works great with older populations. So maybe you don't want to invest all your organization's money into social media. Maybe you want to go direct to creating awesome flyers.
I love that idea. And I think that sometimes we get kind of caught up in things being so high tech that we forget that low tech is effective as well. And I really could see that working also for people who have different issues with accessing the internet. So if you all don't know, in Virginia, there is a program called People Inc. And it's a community action agency that serves many counties and many areas within Virginia. And for the greater Prince William area, they also have an internet connectivity program. So not only could it be helpful to people who maybe are not computer savvy, but even those who do not have internet connections, which we now know because of their advertising of that program, that there are many people within our community who just don't have, you know, access to internet. That could work for them too. So for those of you all who might be serving those populations, that's something to keep in mind. And another question is, how do we get in touch with Ibrahim and LEM? People want to get in touch
Natasha,
with
thank you so much. You're always more than welcome to reach out to me. My email, I'll actually put it in the comments right after this, I give this little answer. You can follow us on our social media. You can subscribe on our website, lensinmedia.com. We have you scroll to the bottom, you can subscribe to our email list. We send out a lot of just weekly content to our subscribers. And so I will put my email address here if you or anyone else wants to get in touch. I'm happy to discuss, sort of go talk more about this offline or whatever have you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. And for anyone else who has a question, please continue to add it in here into the chat or to unmute yourself and ask. If no one else has a question for Ibrahim specifically, we're going to go ahead and we're going to transition to Jason. And so Jason is going to teach us all about how we can spread the word far and wide with an awesome marketing plan that is actionable, that's realistic to what we're doing, and that makes sense. So Jason, I made you a co-host or invited you to be a co-host. I'm going to mute myself so you can take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chelsea. I love how Ibrahim's presentation is going to dovetail really well into mine. I was just listening to a lot of things. I was like, you know, we're going to touch on the exact same things and kind of reinforce the same points. So it's almost like you did this intentionally. You found two speakers that it's amazing, right? So let me see if I can share my screen real quick. I think I'm just going to have to do the whole desktop. I was trying to do just the PowerPoint, but then, all right. And then do you all just see the slide? You don't see like all the notes and garbage on the side, all that kind of stuff. It's just
right. We just see the wood grain slide.
Perfect. Okay. So this is the link to download the handouts, the handouts, you know, we're virtual now, so they're not handouts anymore, to go along with this presentation, If you want to write it down real quick, and if Chelsea, if you want to drop it into the chat for me, I'll give you a second to do that. And then as we progress through this presentation, if you all want to drop questions into the chat or unmute yourselves, and if Chelsea, if you want to read off the questions to me, that's fine as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk today about creating an actionable marketing plan, as well as the difference between a marketing plan and what makes it actionable, right? It's the same thing. It's just a little bit of an extra push to make it actionable. And there's my Twitter handle. When I was at a conference, they told me that I really need to build up my Twitter presence, and I haven't. And it's been like years. So it's still there. You can follow me. I'll post eventually. So a little bit about myself. I was the marketing manager for the City of Manassas Park Department of Parks and Recreation from 2015 to 2019. As Chelsea said in my introduction, I am the Constituent Services Director for the Occoquan District Supervisor. And so what Constituent Services is basically assisting people find resources. A lot of them are within the county, but I also refer people to not-for-profits as well. So it's basically connecting people to the best resources that they haven't heard about or may not know about, or both. And so at the marketing division in Parks and Recreation, I had 2 part-time staff that I was able to build up because of my success in the marketing division, right? Because a lot of you are a one-person show. And so when you show success in your marketing through having great campaigns, having good returns, all those kinds of things, you can make the case to build staff. And so that's one of the things I always talk about. Like, one of the hidden benefits of having a good marketing plan is that you can make the case to build your division, to build your communications team. And then just a little bit about all the little things that we've done. And obviously I had to develop the marketing plan, run surveys, create all the collateral, and distribute all of it. I was in charge of advertising and communications. So the main difference that I find with advertising and communications when I talk about it is advertising is you paid for it, and communications is more or less through your own channels. It may be an arbitrary distinction, but when I talk about it in this presentation, that's what I'm saying. And then community outreach, networking groups, what you're doing right now, things like that. And then alternative funding, which is a huge thing for not-for-profits. In Parks and Recreation, our main revenue source was obviously taxpayer funds, but alternative funding would be like grants, donations, things like that. And then just a handful of the awards that I received during that time, and a little bit before that too. So the goals for today, and I have my slides printed out so that way I can also see them in print. So if you see me looking off to the side, I'm paying attention, I promise. So you're going to understand the need for a marketing plan, especially if you don't have one now. You're also going to learn how to make that marketing plan actionable. So if you have one now, just the extra pieces to make it a little bit more actionable so you can do something with it now, to do something with the content that Ibrahim helped you create and helped you discover, right? And then you're going to learn how to make your marketing plan, or learn how to measure your marketing plan's effectiveness, and then adapt as you go along through those campaigns. And then how to use this plan to empower your marketing team. Hey, I need additional staff if you want me to continue having these returns, right? I'm killing myself here, that kind of stuff. So what is a marketing plan? Just a simple marketing plan. So it's a guide that outlines your overall marketing strategy. So it combines elements like buyer personas, your SWOT analysis, goals, and your budget. And Ibrahim talked a little bit about buyer personas kind of more like as an audience. So when he was answering the question about like, well, how do you create content when it's so oversaturated? Well, you refine who your audience is, and you do that through buyer personas. And so you can look up buyer personas on Google for a template, but basically it's like, think of a buyer persona as an individual person. Like, this is one person that I serve. This is how old they are. This is their gender. This is what they do for a living. This is how many kids they have, how much their disposable income is, blah, 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 all that. That is that person. Then you basically build a marketing campaign as if you were advertising to that specific person. So that way you're basically kind of getting like a law of averages right there. So you know that you're not targeting everybody, but you have an idea of like who, because like having an audience is like, oh, boomers, right? Like, I want to target 55 plus. It's kind of a vague idea, but if you're able to build out who that 55 plus person is and what they like, but also like if they like certain hobbies, where you can advertise to. And so the marketing plan provides overall direction. So it's kind of like, where are we heading? What is the main strategy here? What's the purpose of the marketing division? Like, you know, a lot of people say like, we need marketing because marketing is so important. Well, why is it important? Why is it important for this specific organization? And your marketing plan should be able to answer that, either directly or indirectly. So mainly it answers what and who. So what? So like for Parks and Recreation, what are our facilities? What are our services? What are our strengths, weaknesses, competitors, you know, things like that. And then who are your audiences and people you're serving. And another thing that you have to remember too is that a lot of you do have a team, whether you realize it or not. You have volunteers, you have a board, you have friends, you have all these kinds of people you can leverage maybe leverage is a strong word, but you can rely on to help you out to get things done. I mean, you have board members that would be interested in content creation. You just haven't asked them yet. If you have someone you haven't engaged yet, or someone that thinks they could be engaged a little bit more, ask them like, hey, would you mind shooting a video for me? Or would you mind taking pictures at this event? Because I can't be speaking at the podium and also doing video at the same time, things like that. And if you have a larger team, like if you're working for a government agency, so like when I was at Parks and Recreation, I had to advertise preschool. I have no kids. So talking about preschool to preschool parents was very difficult for me, but the preschool teacher could do it all day long and do it better than I could. So I just took her words, refined it with my marketing lens, and then pushed it out. And that's how you build success. You don't have to do everything on your own as a marketing person. Try to find who you know that can help you build your communications, make your communications stronger. So what makes your marketing plan actionable? So it specifically details the actions you and your team are going to take within a specific timeline to reach your goals, right? So you have this nebulous marketing plan. You're like, I'm going to do that. And then you put it on the shelf and it collects dust and you never get around to it because you get busy, right? I mean, we're all super busy, right? But this is going to help you hold yourself accountable. An actionable marketing plan gives you like, okay, I'm going to do this many times, this many days a week, this, that, and the other, right? That kind of stuff. Already touched on this, kind of jumped ahead on my own slide. How about that? And so it talks about a little bit about where and how you're going to do your marketing. So where can we broadcast? What are your channels? And how are we going to use these channels? How are we going to push out the content that Ibrahim helped us create? How effective is our strategy? Is it working? Do we need to change our strategy, or do we need to put more into this one channel because it's doing so well? Those kinds of things. And so this is kind of a general outline for a marketing plan. Not every marketing plan is going to have all of these things. And maybe you feel like you want to add something else to your marketing plan that's not listed here because of your organization. Just like body types and hair types and everything like that, it's different per individual, different per organization. So don't think that you have to have these things, otherwise it's not an official marketing plan. If you're doing your marketing plan and you just can't make it work and you're just spending so much time on it, I would rather you start your marketing than try to shoehorn a section in. All right, so who is on your marketing team? Is it just you? Do you have staff? All that kind of stuff. I want that to be in your marketing plan. I want you to put that in your marketing plan because you can also talk about the different responsibilities each person has. So what is the overall responsibility of the division in general? And you should be able to kind of do this in one or two sentences, like a mission statement, right? Because if you're starting to get really lofty with what you do, maybe your organization hasn't defined what the marketing team should be doing, or you're doing too much in marketing. And now you're splitting up your efforts and it's diluting what you should be, your impact, what your overall impact should be. And what does your division have authority over? So the things that the marketing division can say yes or no to, right? So like a lot of times in marketing, we're support staff. So we get told yes or no a lot, but we don't have a lot of that in return. So for example, in Parks and Recreation, I did the Mosaic, which was the print catalog for all of our programs. And I had a lot of authority over that because it had a lot of our style guidelines and things like that. So if it wasn't submitted in the correct format, I could send it back for that kind of stuff, for eds. So that's the idea when you think of authority for your marketing team, specifically your marketing team. And if your marketing team doesn't have authority over anything, maybe you should look at that, because it can be pretty difficult for a marketing team to have success if they don't have authority over a single thing. It's like if they don't have the final say in a single thing. So then expand upon your overall responsibilities as a division. So you can break it out like I did at the beginning of the slide, the collateral, alternative funding, and what those things mean for your organization. And just keep it brief, right? Again, this is just an overall strategy and overall definition of who your team is and what your marketing division looks like. And then you might consider having a marketing division responsibilities chart. I believe that's in the handouts that I sent you, that I provided with the link. So I don't know if you guys have heard of Emergenetics. I'm very structural green, which means I love organization and charts and everything like that. So I was very, very, very specific about every single thing. I think my division responsibility chart was like 5 pages long. It doesn't have to be that long. But basically you're just saying like, okay, I have a graphic designer. This is their responsibilities. They're responsible for content creation, for creating video for social media. And you can get as nitty gritty as you want. And that way, what helps with the responsibility chart is it helps you find out where your holes are in your organization, who has too many responsibilities, and ultimately how you can build job descriptions. because when you're writing job descriptions for marketing people, a lot of times it's all the things, and it's so overwhelming for marketing people to apply for these jobs. So I was looking at job listings for not-for-profits the other day, and I saw one for, I think it was PFLAG National. And they said one of the things they were asking for social media experience was TikTok. And I was just like, oh, wow. I remember 2 years ago, we were told to delete TikTok from our phones because it was a security risk. And now we have to be experts on TikTok. I feel like I got a little shortchanged here. But think of those things, and being able to be specific in your job descriptions, and having a responsibilities chart can help you with that. All right. And again, if you can't clearly articulate any of these things, think about that and think about why it's so hard to articulate it. Maybe, again, you need to create a separate team or a separate division, or hire different people, or bring on different people to your team, or bring on volunteers. So what are the projects for the marketing division? So these are the projects your division is specifically responsible for. Again, projects you ultimately had the final say in, right? So like I had the survey that I did, the comprehensive survey, the mosaic, the program catalog, those kinds of things, the website, I had a lot of final say in. And these projects are also funded with your specific budget as well. So that way, if someone on your board, it's like, I would really like to see our website do more amazing things, you're like, well, this is the budget that we have dedicated to the website specifically, right? Because a lot of times you'll see budgets where it's just like, oh, there's $30,000 dedicated to marketing, but they don't itemize it out. This is a really good place to itemize it out, especially if it's housed almost entirely within the marketing division. So what is your role in that specific project, right? So for the mosaic, I didn't write the programs. I had other staff write the programs. I don't come up with the programming. We have program specialists that do that. My job is to put it into this booklet, make it, kind of revise it so that the grammar is good, all those kinds of things. So be specific about what your role is and what you expect out of other people on your team as well. And then one other thing to think about on this page is, like, if marketing completely didn't exist in your organization, what would stop happening completely? Like, would your website stop updating? Those are the kinds of compelling arguments you can make when people are trying to, cut your division or cut your resources, especially if you're in government. Because, that comes up a lot, and marketing is always one of the first places they look to cut. Like, do we need business cards? Well, you think business cards are important, those kinds of things. Special events that your team does. So, when I was still at Parks and Recreation, we did not-for-profit lunch and learns. And the reason I started doing that was to get more exposure to our not-for-profit rental scholarships at Parks and Recreation. So one of the issues we had at Parks and Recreation was not-for-profits would come to us asking for comp space all the time. And because we were a government agency, we didn't want to look like we were picking and choosing who was the more worthy organization. So we created, as government does, we created bureaucracy to make it look more, to make it more equal and make it more fair. And it ended up being a really popular idea. And it actually helped us make more relationships for not-for-profits. We actually got more requests for comp space. And a lot of the not-for-profit agencies were willing to pay 25% or 50%, right? They aren't always expecting 100%. They were just expecting some discount. And so the special events that your marketing team may vary based on your organization, because some marketing teams do special events and some organizations have a division that does special events all on their own. And then any reports, right? So I mentioned I did the comprehensive survey. So every year I would do a comp survey to analyze how people were engaging in our facilities, our programs, and things like that. So some marketing divisions will have that, and some organizations will have that as a separate office completely. So this is a big part of your marketing plan. What are your marketing channels? And so again, me being a structural green person, I'm very, very specific, and I would list out every single channel and get really specific. So for example, I wouldn't just put Facebook as a channel. I would say my Facebook cover photo is a channel. My Facebook feed is a channel. Be that specific, because you can put different content in different places and use them for different reasons and different ways. And so if you're looking at magazines, Who is their audience? If you're putting advertising in a magazine and they can't tell you who their readers are, maybe you should reconsider advertising in them, especially if you're paying. If they're giving you comp space, use it all up. I go for it. But if you're paying for advertising and you don't know who you're targeting in those channels, you should really find that out. Right, so I mentioned social media, list out all of your print or digital advertising, all the magazines you put advertisements or press releases, who you send your press releases to, even if it's free, right? It doesn't have to be advertising, just to be your straight up communications that you created. So we had like online deal sites like Groupon, Certificate. We used a lot of those kinds of things. What are your digital collateral things that you own that you're putting out there? Your print collateral, any signage, especially if you have a facility that was one of the great things about working in the community center at Parks and Recreation, having your office in the same place as one of the facilities, is that you can just throw up signage and watch how people react to it really instantly. And then any channels that you aren't using. And this is especially important if you have board members that are trying to, and I talk a lot about board members, so there's a lot of board members on here. I promise I'm not trying to like insult you or anything like that. I see board members as part of the team, right? But if you have board members that are trying to direct your marketing in an indirect way, right? Like they're not really involved in marketing, but they want to say you should be doing this, and this. You can be like, look, I investigated this. It's too expensive for us. Our audience isn't on there, right? And just because you're not currently using it doesn't mean that you shouldn't use it in the future, right? You've done the research. You have it in this place in your marketing plan as a placeholder to come back to so you don't forget it and lose it, right? I always write stuff down. So why not have it as a placeholder in your marketing plan? Okay, so what are your goals? And of course, we're going to talk about SMART goals, but I won't go too much into that because I know you all have heard SMART goals to death. But pick out 3 to 5 goals you want to focus on in your fiscal year or your calendar year, however you want to break it up, right? And I'll give you some examples of some of the goals we used in Parks and Rec in the next slide or so. But then figure out how you choose these goals, right? So for not-for-profits, do you want to increase your alternative funding or your donations for a specific service, or do you want to advertise a specific service, right? So Ibrahim talked a little bit about like advertising or getting the word out about your organizations and the things that you do and the impact that you have. One of the reasons I love working for government and helping not-for-profits is that there's so many things that you all do and that the government does that people don't know about. And so one of the examples I love to use, and it's okay because Bonnie and I get along really well, is Volunteer Prince William has such a huge impact in Prince William County, but no one knows what they do other than recruit volunteers. And they do so much more than that. And I tell her that all the time. And so she's always just like, you know what, you're right. We do X, Y, and Z. I should put that in my newsletter next time. So maybe it's exposure. Sometimes exposure is a good enough goal on its own to get people to know your organization, right? Because if you have this really lofty goal of raising so much money for this service that no one's heard of, maybe this year or the first half of the year, you focus on the exposure for this program or service. And then the second half of the year, you focus on raising funds for that specific service, those kinds of things. So your SMART goals, again, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound, right? So you want to make sure that it's a very specific goal, nothing too vague. You want to make sure you have a way to measure it, and we're going to talk about how to measure it. Make sure it's attainable, right? If you're going to try and raise $1 million in 1 year, and your average donations are you usually get per year 10,000, maybe that's not super attainable. Make sure it's relevant to your organization, right? So like if you have a service that's not doing super well, is that a relevant service that you should continue to be providing? And then time bound, making sure that you give yourself some level of accountability to stick to that goal, right? So here are some goals that we used to do for Parks and Recreation, right? So max out preschool registration for the 2020-2021 school year, right? Doesn't sound very specific, but it is, right? Preschool is a very specific program. I have that time bound element in there, right? Because it's for a very specific school year. It's very relevant because the preschool program was seeing a decline in registration. So I wanted to sink more resources into that specific campaign. And it's measurable. I know how many kids registered for preschool. So that it doesn't have to be this long, statement, this long paragraph to have a goal. 100% enrollment in 2020 summer camps, same thing. 40 new All Access Passport memberships. So All Access Passport was our signature membership that that got us the most money for our division, but our department, but also provided the most services. So those kinds of goals. So building out your marketing plan. You want to include a brief description of the goal, right? So if we're talking about preschool, what is this goal? Why is this an important goal for the department? Was it simply because you just randomly chose a goal you wanted to work on, or is there a specific reason why you chose this? If you were in the 2020 pandemic and things like that, if you're looking for specific projects that you were able to run them virtually, maybe that's why you chose that as a goal for this year, things like that. We talked about timelines. Your target audience, if you have them defined now, you might not. Sometimes it's easier to come up with some goals and then identify the audiences. But you do want to eventually have your audiences identified as part of your plan. And then measures of success. How do we know we got there, right? So like preschool, obviously it's registrations, but there's so much more than that, right? Are we getting calls about preschool? Are we getting tours to see the preschool classroom? Are we getting inquiries about preschool over social media or by email? There's different ways to measure your success, especially when it comes to marketing. Registrations is the last thing to measure your success. And then your steps to meet goals. So you're going to break up each of the steps by categories. So you created for your channels. And that has a little bit of the actionable component. We're going to talk about that later. And then I love having placeholder sections in my plans just because I have lots of ideas. I'm also a little conceptual yellow. So I want to make sure that I have somewhere to go back to. And we'll talk a little bit about those two sections. So measures of success. So if I have a goal of reaching 130 total All Access Passport memberships by July 2020, how do I measure that other than simply having the membership sold? So we talked a little bit about inquiries over the phone and email. I had the front desk track, when they get a phone call about All Access Passports, we got 20% more phone calls in this past month alone about All Access Passport memberships. I didn't sell all 20% of those calls or whatever, an All Access Passport membership, but we had a lot more people inquiring about it. So the more people who are inquiring about it, hopefully that percentage of sold is going up as well. The tours, we talked a little bit about that. So sometimes I'll use bit.ly links or short links, and you should be able to track those using short codes and things like that. We'll talk a little bit about that at the end, about some resources you can use. If you have an email newsletter, a lot of the services will allow you to track your clicks on specific areas like a heat map. So if you see like your All Access Passport reference is getting a ton of clicks, look at what you did there, see what the photo was, see what the copy was, what you wrote there, and see why it resonated with people so well. If you have a specific web page on your website that's dedicated to All Access Passport memberships, you can see the views shot up as you're doing a very specific campaign. And then interactions with All Access Passport posts on social media. So not just your likes, but also your comments, your shares, things like that. And you can usually export that out through Facebook or various other social media channels. So the steps to meet goals, which is going to be the actionable part of your plan. So this is what's going to hold you accountable, right? You have this great plan, you have all these ideas, you know where you're going to advertise, you know who you're going to do, who you're going to target, but now you actually have to do the work, or someone does, maybe not you, maybe you have a volunteer. So what is your social media strategy? So I'm going to post about the All Access Passport membership twice a month. That's it. Nothing complicated, nothing difficult. Of course, as Ibrahim said, it could take you 8 hours, 4 hours for each post, depending on how many channels you're posting on. You want to make sure that and these bullet points are things that I was telling myself, right? So these aren't things that you specifically have to do, right? Especially if you're doing like an awareness campaign or anything like that. But for me, I wanted to make sure that my posts had a measurable call to action. So anytime we posted about All Access Passport memberships, I wanted to make sure that I linked to our email newsletter, because that's a really good way to demonstrate the value of our All Access Passport membership, because our newsletters always had a ton of programs in there, right? So everything kind of had a logical flow to it. But also, like, maybe I wanted to link to the membership page on our website so people can learn a little bit more. So that way it's not every time I see it on Facebook, it's always the exact same link. So you can change it up too. And then maybe I want to boost an All Access Passport membership post that's doing pretty well organically for about $20 on Facebook. Maybe I want to do that. And you should be referring back to your plan over and over again, right? Like this isn't something that should be collecting dust. This is something you should be checking like every day, maybe every couple days, and being like, oh yeah, I did mean to spend $20 on a post, but I got I got busy with other things. So this is something that this is something that you really want to be engaging with and maybe modifying over time, or definitely modifying over time, because your goals will change and you're going to want to adapt if things aren't going well, right? Because if you're posting on social media and you're getting zero traction on these posts, you should redirect that energy. So come up with content ideas. Luckily, we had a whole presentation on that, so I don't have to go into hardly any of that here. But some ideas for your content is like what you're offering, your competitive advantages, sharing blog posts from your own website or other people's blog posts if it's relevant, but also not a big competitor, right? So like if I shared blog posts from a Parks and Rec organization from California, it's okay because they're going to come to Manassas Park before they go to California Parks and Rec. And of course, videos. And again, other people's videos. So I did a little bit of marketing for this organization called Pickleballers in Chantilly, and they didn't have a lot of their own video content because they were brand new. So what I would share was like tips and tricks from pros on their page. So that way we leverage their authority figure, ness, or however you want to put it. And that way we looked like a more authoritative figure, even though we were brand new. One other thing to think about when it comes to content is your audience has needs and they have problems. So what are their problems and how can you solve their problems? Especially if it's not for profits, that's your whole thing, right? A lot of for-profit organizations, they don't think of themselves in that direction, but you all think about this constantly. So coming up with content, as Ibrahim had given you tons of advice on, that's definitely where you want to lean on. And then using a social media calendar. So the next slide is an example of a social media calendar. It doesn't have to be exactly like this. This is one I got from an organization called Imagine, located in Manassas. And so you can see it's built out like a calendar. It's through Excel. And so there's like 3 or 4 slots that you can put in like, okay, I'm going to post about preschool on Twitter on the 1st, the 10th, the 15th, or whatever. So that way you can see how your calendar is going to look. You're making sure you're not posting things too close together that are the same theme. Of course, you want to take into consideration how your audience interacts with social media, right? So if you're not going to post at 3 a.m., right? So, or maybe you do, I don't know, wherever your audience is, right? Maybe you have a huge following at 3 a.m. The point is you want to take that into consideration as you're building out this calendar. And then again, I love placeholders. So on the left-hand side, this is where you should be dropping in some of those actionable things. Okay, I said I was going to write a sponsored post for Prince William Living. Oh, no, they're going to write it for me. I'm paying them to write it. But the point is like I'm asking Prince William Living to write a preschool post in the month of June. So I want to make sure I remember that. So I'm putting it in my calendar, right? So that's where you can use this placeholder section, and you can retitle it however you want, right? I just put those titles in because that's how my brain works for my organization. But maybe those categories don't work for you, or you just want to have a general list. And again, this is available at that link to download, or you can build your own calendar. So your advertising strategy, right? We're still looking at the actionable part of our plan, right? This is the biggest part of our plan, our goals, our specific goals, right? So we're going to place 2 print ads in Prince William Living magazine in January and March. And why are we doing that? Well, January, everyone wants to get fit because they just had a holiday season. They're thinking about the summer. So we want to make sure that we have our all access passport memberships there because the whole family can get fit. That's going to be our Get Fit, our campaign. And then why March? Well, March, we have our summer camps being released, and you get a 40% discount on summer camps if you have the all access passport membership. And so we want to make sure that we're advertising that membership in March, right? So make sure there's a reason why you're picking which month to advertise in certain locations. And then we're going to do digital ads for the same month because I don't want to forget that I'm also paying for digital ads. And then I'm going to do sponsored posts in these various locations. And if I'm going to write it, I don't have it listed, but if they're going to write it, I have it blocked out. And so some of you might not know what a sponsored post is. It's basically a press release. It's written more like an organic content for their website. So it's a little bit more not in their voice, but like maybe you'll see on a news article, you'll see sponsored content, but it reads like a news article more than a press release. That's what the sponsored posts are. Now, some people write press releases instead of sponsored content, so it reads like a press release, but they're really supposed to be a little bit more native to their platforms. So what's your digital collateral strategy? So I'm going to post blogs once a month about the All Access Passport memberships. And I'm going to talk about the benefits, and maybe I'll interview some satisfied customers, or I'll talk to some instructors to get people really into the programs we offer. I'm like, I want to take so many programs because some of these instructors sound so cool. I might as well get an All Access Passport membership because it's going to be more affordable. I'm going to do website sliders on the front of the website. Do Facebook cover photos because that gets a lot of exposure. Someone lands on our social media page, it's the first thing they're going to see. It's going to be in every newsletter because this is our moneymaker other than rentals. So I want to make sure that it's getting the maximum exposure to the most audience that we have. And that's going to be the email newsletter, right? It's coming directly to them. And then I'm going to ask all of my team to put the monthly special in their email signature, right? Don't forget, you have different places that people are exposed to all the time. How many emails do you send out a day? Do you have your donation link in your email signature? Do you have some service you want to highlight in your email signature? And keep it fresh. Change your email signature every once in a while. Don't keep it stale, because after a while it becomes road noise or white noise or something like that. What is it? I forget the term. You know what I mean? All right, cool. All right, print collateral. So these are all the things that you're printing out, right? So your flyers at your front desk. Ibrahim mentioned that the 55 plus crowd really loves flyers. They respond well to flyers and mailers. Yes, agree, 100%. Include membership specials on school flyers on months without special events. So what are school flyers? So school flyers were flyers that we would send out to Prince William County and City of Manassas Park schools about our upcoming programs, mostly special events because they were mostly free. But on the reverse side is something that's not free. So that way they know we also offer programming and you can get it at a discount because of this awesome membership that's for your whole family, those kinds of things. We also did little info cards. So info cards are basically just business cards that are very easy to hand out. We would do referrals. And so we would have like a space in the card for the current member to write their name. So that way when the prospective member came in, they would turn this card in and get a discount for the referral. But then we would know who to also give a discount for their renewal because we had that little info card. And they're so easy to carry around, right? Because you carry your business cards everywhere. So maybe create an info card specific to your a specific service or to your donation link with some information on what their donation will have an impact on, like what you spend those donations on. And then if someone was having an expired membership coming up or they were expired for a month, I'd send them a postcard and say like, hey, we miss you, that kind of thing, those kind of campaigns to kind of like be like, you know what, I meant to renew and I just, just time got away from me. I'll come in, right? So, and see how those campaigns do, right? You don't want to always have the same postcard exactly the same year after year. Change up the verbiage, see what lands with people well, change your photos, right? One thing we always talk about Parks and Recreation is if we had pictures of kids that were now adults, it's time to change the picture. Some people put their signage as part of their print. I like to separate it out just because I love categories. So we would have table tents in the building, January and April, for All Access Passport membership. We talked about why January. April was because of summer camps, right? Because we talked about March for them coming out. Now we're talking about April because the weather is getting better. So it's even more on top of mind. And we're going to combine All Access Passport perks with other signage. Anytime we advertise preschool, anytime we advertise summer camps, we're going to talk about how the All Access Passport membership can save them money. And we're also going to offer a 1 month free membership on the Manassas Mall banner, which had a ton of exposure. I would get it in December because it would be right above Santa Claus. And who loves seeing Santa Claus? Kids. And so kids are sitting there waiting in line with their parents. The parents look up and they're like, that's something to do. And that's not very far from here because Manassas Park is like 4 miles up the street. And so then they would go to this link on their phone because they're sitting in line. And now I have a measure of how many times they visit, or how successful this banner is, right? Because I can see how many people visited that link. And so I don't know if this promotional strategy will apply to the not-for-profits in this group as much, but if you want to have a separate category to push out your promotionals, your deals, things like that, you can have a separate category in your actionable marketing plan. So if you have the authority to do so, right? So like, I want to offer 50% off preschool, and preschool teachers just like, I can't afford that because I need to show some revenue. But again, work with the other divisions, work with other people to see if you can make this happen, right? So there was an app that the Haymarket Gainesville Business Association had, and so I would push out, deals every once in a while through that app. It was really helpful. We had a text campaign, so every once in a while I would, push out the specials for that month. Every month was a different special. So it's like 12% off in December because it's the 12th month, things like that. And then create specific deals in January and April for the text campaign to reflect on the Get Fit and the summer camps. And then this is a big piece that you all can take advantage of, is community engagement. So if you have a specific staff member, you can use this section to delegate those tasks to them, right? A lot of us were just going to split up the work anyway. Even in my office, we all participate in community engagement. But I was able to hire someone who specifically did community engagement because I just couldn't be in all places at all times. You can create and run an advisory committee. I mean, government, we love committees. Let's create some more. But it makes people feel like their membership has more value because now you have members providing feedback directly and being invited to provide feedback. You can have a thank you event. You could provide special gifts and perks for every special event. So one thing that we would do is if you had an all access passport membership and you registered for a special event, you would have an extra swag bag. It wasn't anything special, just like candy or a little bit of our giveaway stuff. But it was only for all access passport members. So I love the whole fear of missing out and getting people like, oh, why did they get a bag? I'm also at the special event. Well, you're not an all access passport member, but if you were, you'd get one too, that kind of thing. We talked a little bit about expired memberships. And then this is one idea that we had that we never really launched, but maybe thanking a random all access passport membership and sending them an extra special gift, not just your promo material, but maybe a small bouquet or something. I'm saying flowers because it's Mother's Day is on top of my mind. And also Chelsea has flowers in her background, but things like that, All right, so that's the actionable part of your plan. So we just talked a little bit about the different parts of the goals that you break up into categories, and these are all things that you're gonna do. Now we can talk a little bit about those placeholder sections that I mentioned. So areas to investigate. Okay, so you're coming up with this plan. You're like, what would be a really neat idea is if we also did this, or maybe I should look more into this, or we're not quite ready to do all these pieces because I feel like I need to do a little bit more research. This is a really good placeholder section to use. And it's a placeholder, right? This is something you need to come back to. Don't just leave it here and then forget about it. You put it intentionally on here. So I want you to have intention to come back to it. So using the preschool example, I want to identify or develop 5 competitive advantages to our preschool. Again, I don't have kids in preschool. I'm not a preschool teacher, not an educator. Who knows this information? The preschool teacher. And if she can't answer this question, then you need to work with them on finding them and making them happen. If we don't have competitive advantages, our preschool program is never going to get off the ground. So think leverage, again, rely on your volunteers and your resources. We're going to develop a survey and we're going to interview 10 parents, right? This is kind of that content creation. We want testimonials to be able to share, right? I have in my goals that I want to share testimonials, but I don't have any testimonials, so I got to get them. The patron engagement survey was the comp survey I was telling you about. So I want to figure out who are our preschool parents? What are their hobbies, right? I don't know them. My preschool teacher does, but I don't know them. So let me see what they have in common and see if there's some interesting magical thread that connects all of them together. Maybe they all love motorcycles and I'm going to advertise in a motorcycle magazine and suddenly our preschool program is going to be doing, making money hand over fist, those kinds of things. And then working with other organizations and partners, right? So Head Start, they offer free preschool, but not everybody qualifies for Head Start. So I'm just like, hey, Head Start, here's our postcard in case you have a parent that doesn't qualify, send them our way. And we'll do the same for you. We'll tell them about Head Start, because the most important thing for us is not necessarily making money or making revenue, right? Because we're never going to be profit. Parks and Rec doesn't make profit. We would measure our success as what do we call it? Cost recovery. So anything under 100% of the money we made back, right? We never broke even. So we would always measure cost recovery. So we want to make sure that we're providing the services and getting people the resources they need that's most important to them. So if they qualify for free preschool, I'm going to direct them there. And they're going to do the same for us if they don't. And then we had a Catherine's Carrying Hand scholarship, so that if people qualified, if they didn't qualify for Head Start, but they wanted to participate in our preschool program, this scholarship program might be able to lessen the costs. So future goals. So these future goals are a little bit more about your division itself, not specifically about those other goals that you outlined, right? So what projects and channels could you incorporate in your division if you were fully staffed? So I always talked about, like, if I had a dedicated graphic designer, I could do infographics, and I really want to do infographics because it responds to people. People love to see them on blog posts. They love to see them on social media, and it really makes difficult information digestible. But my skills at graphic design are extremely limited, so I'm never going to be able to do it myself. Those kinds of things. And what are the goals you had to put off due to resource limitations, right? Maybe you wanted to put together this huge banquet, but you couldn't afford it because you didn't have enough volunteers or funds or anything like that. So again, placeholder, parking lot for important future goals. And this can help you advocate for more resources because you can clearly articulate it, especially if your future goals tie into your current year goals. They don't have to, but if they do, you can make a stronger case, right? It's well thought out. And then just some final pieces that you might want to include in your marketing plan, especially if you're a government agency. So general ongoing goals, right? Our ongoing goals, I'm always working on awareness. And what does awareness look like? And why is awareness important to our division? And how do we make sure that that awareness stays on brand, right? Because you don't want to veer off. Sometimes you want to do something funny or silly or whatever, but you don't want to veer off brand too much, and then your voice gets confusing and messy. Who do you send your press releases to? You should always have media contact lists. This is a great place to put it because especially if your marketing person left, your next marketing person you bring on, or you, if you pick up that mantle, will know exactly where that list is. So you don't have to go hunting it down. I would also put my vendors in there. So anyone I bought promo materials from, whoever I sent my the print catalogs to print out for me, that's who I put there. Different things like that. The caterer I would use for the not-for-profit lunch and learns. The networking groups and committees your division is involved in, especially if you do a ton of community engagement, is a good place to put that. And then especially for government, but maybe some not-for-profits, especially maybe Volunteer Prince William's a really good example because they do a lot of emergency management, is like, okay, if there's an emergency in the city, what are the radio contacts that I need to reach out to let them know that Parks and Rec is a shelter, things like that. A lot of times your emergency operations center will handle that, but a lot of times you get roped into the emergency operations center, especially if you're in Parks and Recreation, you get repurposed really quickly. So just having that ahead of time just makes your job a lot easier because that's probably one of the first things they're going to ask you. And if you're having an emergency and your internet's down, your job gets a lot harder. So just doing it ahead of time helps out a lot. So we talked a little bit about the goals and applications. So we're going to talk a little bit about tools and resources that will make your job a little bit easier. So Google Analytics is one of them. If your website isn't on Google Analytics, get it on right away, today, tomorrow, hopefully. It doesn't take a lot of effort and it gives you so much information. So you can see how many people have visited a specific page on your website. So that way you can see if your campaigns are having success. So I talked a little bit about short links. I was talking a little bit about Bitly. Bitly's gotten really expensive. So I don't use Bitly anymore. So for my office, we use Blink, but I was able to get Switchy for a huge discount through Appsumo, which I'll talk about at the end of the slide. And then branded short domains, right? So I don't have a branded short domain for myself. That's why at the beginning of the presentation, it was switchy.io. I'm not paying for jasonschreiner.io just for that one link. But for your organization, I highly recommend having a short domain. Domains are not expensive. It should be short, right? So this should be something they could type on their phone, or when you send out a text to your text service, it's not eating up all of your characters to send out a link. And a lot of these services also track analytics. So you can have analytics through them and through Google Analytics. You can have it in maybe a little bit more digestible format and then the more comprehensive format. And all of those organizations or companies will tell you how to activate your short domain. So your short domain you would get through like GoDaddy or something like that, and then you would activate or connect it through those apps. So Google Campaign URL Builder, this is a really good way to see how your links are working through various formats, right? So let's say, for example, I created a blog about the All Access Passport membership, and I wanted to advertise it on several different medium. So I would say like, okay, I want to have it linked on a flyer. I want to have it linked on Facebook. I want to have it through the text campaign. Well, if I use the same link for all three, I don't know which one was the most successful or had the most return. So if you go to Google Campaign URL Builder, you're able to generate different links for the exact same website, and then go to your Switchy or your Bitly, and then have them each be different links. So that way you can see, so that way you're using short links, right? Because your campaign URL builder is going to be huge, but then you make it shorter through your short link service, and then you can see which one of those media was the most successful. It sounds really complicated, I know. And I'm happy to talk to you all via email later if you want or answer questions. But I promise you, once you start doing it and you get into the habit of doing it, it's gonna be worthwhile. And you're gonna need to do that in order to measure how successful your campaigns are, in order to adapt, right? Because if you're having a campaign URL, if you have a campaign that has print and digital, and you don't know that your print is not doing very well, you're spending a ton of money on print that you could be repurposing somewhere else. So these are a couple tech services we used. Textly was the one that we had to pay for. Remind was free because we were associated with a school, basically, because we had preschool. There are tons of tech services out there. Just make sure you measure how expensive they are against each other, especially how many texts you're going to send out a month. There's tons of social media scheduling software. At the time, I was using Publer, and I don't think there's an E in Publer. I always forget how to spell Publer because it's one of those weird words. But like Postoplan, Promo Republic, Hootsuite, those kinds of softwares. If you're doing everything manually, you're spending a lot of time on your social media. You're making your 4 hours per post, like 10 hours per post. But you do want to make sure you're tailoring your content, right? A lot of these services will say like, oh, you just have to create one post and we'll spread it everywhere. But then you look at your Twitter and the photo is shifted the wrong way, or you look at your Instagram and the content didn't get shared correctly. So you still want to make sure that you're catering your content the way that Ibrahim said, but use this software so that way you're not juggling 5 tabs on your browser instead of just the one. Surveymonkey, if you don't have it, is a great way to measure your surveys. It's just really comprehensive. I haven't seen any other survey service that works as well as it does. It's a bit expensive, but if you all have recommendations to share with each other, go for it. I love project management software. My favorite one is Asana. Again, it's not super cheap, but it is free for under 5 people, I believe it is. You don't have access to all the features, but at least you can kind of keep all your ideas in one place. And this is a great way to make your marketing plan, your actionable marketing plan, easy to go over, right? You can create reminders in Asana, so that way you remember to post in January when you're writing this plan, in October, things like that. I love project management software. It's the best way to stay on top of things. And then Appsumo. I can't speak highly enough about Appsumo. It's such a cool website. Basically, a lot of the applications that they promote are relatively new or have been around for a little while, and they're trying to get basically some capital, right? They're trying to get a surge of money. And so they'll offer you a lifetime deal to their service. So like Publer was one of the ones that was on there. So you can have access to their gold plan for your entire life for like $100 just now. So instead of paying $100 every month, now you just have this lifetime app. And I've gotten to the habit of hoarding apps. That's what my coworker says. I see something that's like really cool. I have no use for it right now, but I'm just like, I think this will come in handy in the future. So I'll spend the $100 now and then have it, eventually I'll use it or whatever. And the nice thing is a lot of these apps that they promote through Appsumo, as they develop their program or their application, you still get those updates, right? So right now, maybe Publer doesn't have all the features that you wish that they would, but in a year they might, and you don't have to pay anything extra for it because you got in when they were offering a lifetime deal. So you sign up their newsletter, they have new apps on there every week. You can browse it. It's a super great website. Our office got Smart Task, which is a project management software through Appsumo, and we absolutely love it. And so that's the end of my presentation. There's my email. You can also email me, jason.schreiner@gmail.com. That's my personal email. I obviously check both, whatever you're most comfortable with. And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to attempt to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Some of the comments that you've gotten, they're all wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Such great resources. Thank you. Linktree. Rodrigo has shared that Linktree is also free for registered nonprofits as well. I mentioned that if you are a Canva user, you can upgrade to Canva Pro for free if you're a nonprofit, and they have scheduling functions within that too, kind of similar to what you mentioned with Hootsuite and some of the others. Did anyone else have a question? You got a super job, Jason, from Mrs. Howard.
Oh, thanks.
So does anyone else have a question for Jason? I know we have a couple of questions that were submitted prior to the training beginning. And one of them was specifically, if you all, and you can answer this too, Ibrahim, I don't think this was specifically just for you, Jason, but we'll start with you, Jason, since we just wrapped up your portion. But are there any specific tips you have for how these groups that have created this awesome content or working their wonderful marketing plan, how they can best engage with the media? So with reporters and all those different types of different traditional and non-traditional media sources. Do you have any tips for reaching out to them so that they choose to share your press release or do a story on you or whatever, cover your event?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best thing you can do as a not-for-profit is to build a relationship with those news, the news sources, right? The news media, with specific reporters or the publishers if it's a smaller organization. You basically want to be friends with them. It's networking. It's right. You want to make your content relevant to them because they know you, they know your organization, they know you're going to do a good job. If you just send your press releases to info@news whatever, then that's fine. But they're not going to publish everything they get from there. They're going to pick and choose. So building those relationships is really going to make a big difference. And then if you're able to recruit one of these reporters or publishers as a board member, even better, because then you can leverage their relationships with the media as well.
Great idea. I think that's something that most of our organizations maybe haven't thought of doing. But I mean, our media partners and having those people represented on our leadership team in the form of a board member is as important a board member as a banker or anybody else, you know? So I wanted to give Ibrahim you the chance to answer that question too before we go on to the next one.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think Twitter is a great tool to use for people in news because they're looking for the most up-to-date news all the time. So following those news reporters, liking their stuff, sharing their stuff, and on Jason's point, building that relationship with them. I think Twitter is, from all of my friends in sort of politics, I know that for them, they rely and they have good relationships with sort of the journalists when it comes to news because journalists and politicians just love Twitter. I mean, it's incredible there.
It is. It's always so interesting. I often get my news from Twitter more than the actual news. So I don't know if that's good or not. That's such a good point that it's very up to date and a great way for us to share our content. Yeah. Another question is there a difference between boosting a post and creating an ad? So we were talking about Facebook posts when that question came through.
Yeah, generally, and Ibrahim, you can jump in on this because this is more in line with your work. For me, when I'm talking about boosting a post, it's a content that I've already created and I'm seeing it do really well. Or I created an event and I want to just give it a little bit more exposure and I pay for it versus an ad where I specifically created it as an ad campaign and use those platforms like they have like an ad manager and things like that. But Ibrahim, I feel like this is more your wheelhouse.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. But, you know, in our instances, we've created, we had a client in which we created a really strong sort of post on their social media. And we had asked all their staff to share it. And so we started off with like an organic traction. And then that got a bunch of likes and shares. And then we were like, well, let's boost this post because it's already doing so well. And so we created sort of inorganic traction as well. So boosting a post is great for a piece of content that is already kind of doing well. As Jason mentioned too, promotional ads or creating just an ad off the bat is something that's going to be less sort of relevant to a specific community. It's going to be more generalized wording. It's going to be more sort of like tailored to a general audience. And so something that just capsulates and has a direct call to action as well. So I would just be very intentional with whichever one you choose to create regarding your content.
Okay, awesome. Let's see, any additional questions? I don't see any more in the chat. Did anyone have one that they would like to verbally ask? I'm always trying to be more intentional about leaving time after I ask questions because usually I just start talking. So if you all think of some, then please include it in the chat. Ask it verbally. Jason and Ibrahim have presented their contact information within the course of the chat. You can also look them up online via their Twitter and social media and different websites. One thing that I wanted to add is just that as you follow them, you're going to get so much more great content and information. They don't just share this awesome stuff with us. They share this kind of information all over the community. So definitely make sure that you follow them. If there are no more questions, I want to take the time to thank you all so much. You did an awesome job. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. And thank you so much, Jason. Yay! Applause. So my notes are like, oh my gosh, so many notes. So I cannot wait to really just implement all of the great things that we've learned. We've had the pleasure of working with Lindsay Media to create a marketing plan with the Alliance that we're polishing. And it is just so exciting to have a more clearly defined vision for our communications. And I know that you all who have gone through this training will leave with a more clearly defined vision as well. One of the things that I think is really funny, so Jason, I am emergenetics, yellow and red. And so much of our, for those of you all who don't know, it's a personality behavioral work kind of test that kind of categorizes how your work styles are. So most of our marketing plan is like up here in the back of my head and nobody knows it but me. And so as we've onboarded Reggie, we've been working with Ibrahim. We frequently have, he's on this call, he is our operations manager. We frequently just have conversations where it's like, so who do we want to be? What do we want to look like? How do we want our marketing to be? What are we trying to communicate? And I think it's so important for us to be intentional about setting aside time to do that and resources to do that and making sure that, you know, I'm a big sharer. I'm one of those 3 a.m. sharers because 3 a.m. is my peak work hour. So at any given moment, I'm forwarding something, sharing something, liking something at 3 o'clock in the morning, which is crazy because nobody else is on the internet at that time of day, except for other insomniacs. So with that being the case, just even setting aside time to say, I'm not just going to impulsively share this. I'm going to schedule this to go out in a couple of hours when people are actually awake. Has made a big difference in how you see engagement and what happens. And so I know that if you all who maybe came onto this call a little bit apprehensive or saying, you know, we don't have, our organization doesn't have a communications department, we don't have a marketing team, how are we going to do this? I hope that you all are feeling empowered and that you understand that if you've got a phone and a vision, you can make wonderful things happen. And so if there are no other questions, I don't see any more that have come through the chat. If no one else has any other questions for our wonderful presenters, we're going to go ahead and kind of bring this to a close. I want to remind you all that the Human Services Alliance of Greater Prince William is a nonprofit association. And so we provide a lot of different services for our members. Membership for an organization is $100 a year for a 12-month membership. And then it's $50 for an individual. So you all can join regardless of where you might be. And we'll share really exciting content and trainings and things like this with you throughout the course of the year. And also I wanted to share that we have a YouTube channel. So part of our content creation is that when we have trainings like these, we record them so that we can share them with our community members who may not have been able to attend in real time. So with that being the case, all of this great stuff that you all learned today, the wonderful resources that were shared, we will make available to you. So you can look for a link from C. Conaway at alliancegpw.org or R. Thomas at alliancegpw.org. And then when you see that, don't just send us to spam, because we're trying to follow up with you and send you all of this great stuff. So with that, we are going to wrap up. It's just before 2. We want to let you all know that we so appreciate you coming to join us today. We love you. We're wishing you the best in all of your communications endeavors. And again, another round of applause for our speakers. And thank you guys so much. And with that being said, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your Thursday. You guys take care. Bye.